Good afternoon, good morning, or good evening, depending on which part of the world you're at, watching our third in the final installment of the series on Transatlantic Climate Dialogue. We've been aiming to involve innovators and entrepreneurs from both sides of the pond, if you like, to think about climate action and the kinds of actions that are being taken, especially by innovators and entrepreneurs in this very, very dense, complicated marketplace, which is what we call climate action, often mostly driven by government, but actually the role of the private sector is central, but also importantly, as we move ahead, the role of entrepreneurs and innovators actually becomes more central and more critical. What we have for you is entrepreneurs from both sides of the pond. We have France, Netherlands and US represented in this dialogue on this occasion. And what we're doing is we've looked at mobility and climate action. We've looked at how do you nudge citizen behavior through activities, apps, all sorts of actions to become more carbon neutral. We're ending the series with a conversation about money and FinTech and what's the role of FinTech in climate action. And that's what we want to focus our conversation on today. We want to thank the US Mission and our European Leaders Programme for contributing to this series. And we're hoping that what we can do is build on the learning from this and take it forward in a meaningful way. So it doesn't end up being a series of good discussions, but that's down to the kind of contributions and engagement we have in this next 45 minutes or so as well. So one of the things I wanted to say is that it's a fact that might not be known that actually there's something between, let me just check, $3 to $5 trillion should have been earmarked a year for the Paris Agreement. I'm not sure how many of us knew that actually there was that level of financial injection required to achieve those objectives and the aim of the agreement. What we do know is that FinTech is playing a part in that, but a very small part, and it's almost like growing and generating as we speak. What we do know, however, is that there are 400 FinTech entrepreneurs globally, and to our surprise, despite Europe always being badgered and beleaguered actually not being in the space ahead of the game on investment in R&D, most of them are coming from Europe who have been supported by government policy or investment in different ways. So that's an interesting little context setter for this particular conversation. What we want to do is to be able to speak to our entrepreneurs that we have for you and ask them a little bit about the innovation they've created, the solution they've created, and the impact it's having, and then to talk about the challenges of it and how we overcome those challenges, and centrally end with a conversation about what's the role of government more widely in this space, and how do we make sure government takes its right standing, not get in the way, but actually facilitate and enable a different approach to the ecology that we require of not only climate FinTech, but climate action more broadly, using the enterprise and innovation of people. So, without further ado, I want to welcome our very first contributor, Jacqueline. Jacqueline has set up something called carbon equity. Jacqueline, very pleased to have you with us.
Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about carbon equity. What does it aim to do, and what kind of impact is it hoping to achieve?
Yeah, happy to share. So I actually believe that most innovation starts with finance. Finance ultimately decides what happens in the world. So in my entrepreneurial journey, I started off with the question, how do we really move the needle on climate change with capital? I really see finance in a way as sort of the control room of the planet. So how do we make a difference? And the thesis of carbon equity, when we started, we saw a lot of capital moving into ESG stocks on the stock exchange. And that is good, but it's something quite different from impact investing. So what do we mean by impact investing? Impact investing means that you change a situation in the real world economy from situation A to situation B. So how can we build the future with capital? And the thesis of carbon equity is that we can have by far most impact by investing in private markets rather than investing in public markets. So the question is, if you were to buy, say, a share of Tesla, what happens in the real world economy when you buy that share of Tesla? Will Tesla produce more cars? Or will there be no impact? Well, typically when you buy a share from somebody else, you basically buy a share from somebody else and no money goes into the company. So the thesis of carbon equity, if you really want to have an impact, go from situation A to situation B, you have most impact investing in the private markets, especially in early stages of investing, venture capital and growth equity, where money directly goes into the company. And as an investor, you have a high degree of additionality. So unfortunately, if you want to invest in early stage companies, the options for normal people are very limited. So either you can invest directly into companies, which has a ton of impact, but it is also quite risky. For us, the most sensible way to invest in private markets is to be investing in a fund where you diversify across multiple different types of startups. But to invest in a fund is super hard. Typically, you need at least 5 million euros to be able to participate in top funds. Carbon equity seeks to lower that threshold all the way down to 10,000 euros. So by lowering the threshold, carbon equity seeks to unlock a couple of trillion in net worth, sitting with what we call mass affluent investors, people who have a net worth between 100,000 euros and 10 million, to power the world's breakthrough climate technology companies by co-investing alongside the world's top climate investors into their funds. So in practice, that means that we lower the barrier to invest in the world's top climate venture capital and private equity funds from, let's say, 5 million to 10,000 euros, making sure that we unlock much more capital to power these innovative solutions. So that's what we do.
Wow, it's fascinating. You're a disruptor, in effect.
A disruptor, yes, I guess. I mean, the space of venture capital and private equity has always been a space that was really only open to ultra high net worths and professional investors who have, yes, also mostly men. That's absolutely true. And that has yielded them very high returns, you know. So I mean, typically this private markets also outperform the public markets. And what we're trying to do is to open this up and to democratize the space, as a result of which we can put money to work with real impact, but also let more people benefit from the upside potential of investing in these breakthrough solutions. Because our core thesis is that solutions or companies that are solving the biggest challenges in the world will also be the most valuable, both from a planetary perspective, but also from a financial perspective. So that's why we do what we do.
And it'd be interesting to get, because I'm not right, because I'll move on to our next contributor, but to see how the market has reacted to something like you. And as a disruptor, you can imagine that some people will see the long-term implications of what you're doing, saying, that's not going to be good for us. We want to make more money and actually keep the money to ourselves and have a bigger profit margin. And we'll see the democratization process of this and actually spreading the love, the hope and imagination, as well as the money. But let's wait and see. I'll give you time to think about that. Just understanding whether you've had, what kinds of obstacles or reactions you've had from some of the big players in this who are predominantly male. And I'm not saying the gender is definitely an issue, but I know that some of the women that we've had on these kind of discussions have said it's been incredibly difficult to get VC venture capital because the risk appetite on women seems to be higher in terms of being able to access money rather than men in the same situation. But, you know, there we are. Perhaps things are changing. Thank you very much. I'm going to move on to Franz now. Franz, thank you for joining us all the way from Washington, D.C. Thank you for being here. You've created something called Raise Green. Tell us a little bit about it. And again, in a similar way, what you're trying to achieve, what its impact has been.
Absolutely. Well, I'm delighted to be here. Thank you so much for having me, and great to meet you. Thanks to Friends of Europe. And I think Jackie laid out a very clear theory of change that we at Raise Green also ascribe to. And that is basically, and it's actually, there's great research behind this. There's a paper called Beyond Returns that was published in 2018, which was one of the seminal pieces of impact investment research to basically determine how do you create value with your money, or rather not value, but how do you have impact with it, excuse me. And they basically concluded that there are two real ways to do it. You can either hold stock in publicly traded companies and vote your shares as an activist investor, and then the other way to do it is to allocate your capital into inefficient markets where it's difficult to get investment. And what we built Raise Green to do is the latter piece, and that's very consistent, I think, with what Jackie described. So Raise Green is a climate investment platform. We are based in the US, and we're the first inclusive funding portal in the US that's focused on climate solution projects with a social mission. So for those who are overwhelmed by the climate crisis, they have climate anxiety, a full 59% of Americans at this point are either alarmed or concerned about climate, and they want something meaningful that they can do. They're being told that they can recycle or petition their way out of the problem, but those solutions seem mismatched to the scale of this problem. And so at Raise Green, we give individuals and companies the ability to participate in community financing that enables every American to join the ranks of the heroic entrepreneurs and innovators that are powering the transition from dirty to clean energy, and invest into projects directly, whether those are early stage climate tech companies that are coming up with new breakthrough technologies to solve the problem, or they're actually project finance companies that are deploying well-proven technologies like solar or wind at the community scale. It gives everyone the ability to invest in those for as little as $100 and own a piece of the clean energy infrastructure that we need to build. So, that's our form of impact investing for all, and democratizing the access to capital in a way that brings down the cost of capital for those developers, and gives everyone the ability to participate in the solution set.
Really, again, very interesting. Very disruptive in the space, I imagine. And what you're saying is that for as little as $100, someone can actually pay into, buy into, invest into climate action. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and we have thousands of folks that are already doing it.
And make it real for us, kind of break it down for our listeners and viewers. What kinds of things are happening as a result of your portal?
Sure. Well, at the individual project level, we're working with a company out of Baltimore that has is building a community solar project on the rooftop of an inner city East Baltimore high school. And it's a community solar, which means that the subscribers are numerous, and they're all low to moderate income off-takers. So those buyers of electricity are getting a significant discount on their electrical bills. And the investors in the project have the ability to make profit off of building that project and providing that electricity. So you get sort of this virtuous cycle of those, and in some cases, folks who are buying the electricity could also invest in the project. So they're effectively paying themselves for electricity, and this loop goes back and forth.
Fascinating. And what's the reaction been in terms of the regulators?
So as a financial services business, we are heavily regulated in the US by the Securities and Exchange Commission, and we're a member of the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority. So we're fully compliant with their rules and guidelines. And then, as it relates to the electricity sector and local regulations, that varies by utility service area here. So it's very a wide range of policies, but excited to also share more about the largest climate investment in US history that the US Congress just passed and President Biden signed into law, which gives us a major boost toward making all of the climate technologies that need to be deployed much more profitable and much more readily deployable.
No, indeed, it's night and day between the previous administration and the current one in terms of the investment on climate action. It's it's really reassuring that one of the largest economies in the world is deciding not to be a naysayer, but to actually contribute effectively and create this kind of new approach in the United States around this, and actually say to the vested interest we want to do something about this. So it's really good to know that. Just briefly before I move on to Maud, our final contributor, what's the value of your investment book at the moment?
So to date, we have done a little bit over $5 million in gross transaction volume across 16 different securities offerings. So 16 different companies have raised money on our marketplace.
Great, excellent. Thank you for letting us know that. And we'll come back to you on a range of issues. I'm sure that it will be interesting for our listeners and viewers to engage in. Last but not least, Maud, thank you for being patient and thank you for joining us from France. You are one of the end of the marketplace that's created a new eco-bank, a digital bank, an eco-bank. And it's interesting to know from your experience that, I suppose why you set it up, what is it, what's got, I think, if I got the name right, is it Got It or Green Got? Green Got.
Green Got.
Green Got. What does it aim to do?
Yeah, so we created Green Got because if you think about it at our individual scale, 100% of our carbon footprint is either how we spend money, our consumption, or either how our money is invested or managed by our bank. And frankly speaking, right now, our bank, at least in France, are massively having our money directed or indirectly invested into fossil fuel industries. That means that you have a huge carbon footprint that you don't know anything about. And you can do many, many efforts in your everyday life to lower your carbon footprint on the planet because you want to participate. But on the other side, you have your money, what you are working for during your whole life, that canceled all those efforts and that damage 100% more, 100 times more our environment. And if you, as Jacqueline and Franz say that if you see on more like the big picture, money is something we are not going to find a solution without it. We need to speak about money. We don't like to speak about money in France, but we need to do it. We need to speak about finance because finance in French we said like l'argent est le nerf de la guerre. It means money is the sinews of war. Where it goes, the world is built. Right now we direct it towards fossil fuel energies and industries that are emitting a lot of CO2 and that's really not compliant with Paris Agreement or having a viable planet for my generation and the other one. But if we are able and if we manage to redirect the money, as you said in the first minutes, our transition needs a lot of money. And every citizen, every people should be capable to participate also in the funding of that transition. This is why we have built Green Got. It's like a neobank. It's like your everyday bank. You have your debit card in your pocket. You can manage your account on your phone, do everything you want. But what we have more is that your money enable the development of green projects, so renewable energies, low carbon transportation, sustainable agriculture and stuff like that. And what we aim also to do is to bring a transparency on where your money goes, what it enables, which is something you do not know right now. So this is why we have built Green Got, and this is why I guess people liked it and are many to join us.
Wow. So let me just be clear. This is a proper grown-up bank with the cards and everything, right?
So we cannot say it's a bank because we do not do credits. It's like a neobank. So right now we have a current account with your debit card. Our card is also in wood if you want something a little bit crazy in your life. And we are also building a saving account, and we'll go towards then credit and stuff like that. But I'm also evolving in a heavy regulated industry. We are right now fully compliant, of course, for what we do, but the other steps are kind of difficult to reach, and we are still very young.
How long have you been in existence, by the way?
Right now, we have launched 5 months ago.
Oh.
We have been, but we are the best banking launch in the entire Europe of this year.
Tell us more.
Sorry?
You said it was the best banking launch?
Yeah, this is what the specialist FinTech journalist just told me like 2 days ago. I'm pretty proud of it.
Good for you. And do you, I mean, just before I move on to a kind of a general question to all of you, are there others like you that you're connecting with across Europe or elsewhere?
Of course, you have other green neobank popping a little bit in Europe. You have Tomorrow Bank, for instance, in Germany. You have Triodos Bank, which is like a real bank, also more in the north. And you have also in the US Aspiration, which I know is like one of the, I mean, top 5 neobank in the US. So it's pretty big. So yes, green bank are emerging, and we also really hope to inspire more traditional bank, because we are dreamer, of course, at Green Gut, but we are not utopists. We know that by the time we'll be as big as BNP Paribas, Société Générale, and other big banks like that, if no other green banks would have emerged, we'll all have the feet in the water, and we'll be all a little bit warm. So we hope to also kind of inspire and open the path to more traditional bank that has a heavy power in that industry.
So your aspiration isn't to become a high street green neobank, if I understand you, or it might be, or is it to make sure you influence the bigger players whilst also offering an alternative option to citizens?
Exactly. So aspiration has been built on the green value too, but I was more speaking about traditional banks that are here for now 200, 300 years, and has been literally built on coal, on oil, because they at the time needed to fund those industries. Right now, we know that these industries should not be funded anymore, and we should shift to other ones. But it's a little bit difficult for them to stop that relationship, and we are trying to push them a little bit.
Excellent. Let's see what the big players make of it. In terms of whether you're just seen as, you know, a flash in the pan, or whether something which is going to really add value and be part of a wider ecology, and good luck to you in that respect. But, you know, can you imagine with the three of you and all the others that we've had, if we brought all of you together, what, you know, magic could be created in the kind of fintech space, if you like. I want to move to now a question to all of you to, you know, share with us the challenges that you've either experienced or continue to experience in your journey of developing your fintech solution. So, Jacqueline, over to you first.
We cannot hear you, Jacqueline.
A challenge that I think Maud and Franz will recognize is regulation. It's insanely hard to set up a fintech company, and you run into a ton of regulatory requirements, many of which make a lot of sense and are there to protect the consumer. But also at times the burden of regulation can be unnecessarily high. So just one example, for example, in Europe and also in the Netherlands, it is as a retail investor, you are allowed to do like angel investments or crowd equity investments, where you invest in a single company which has a very high chance of failure, and where you make the decision yourself. But you're not allowed to invest in a fund where you have professional management and you can actually diversify your investment across multiple companies. So it's in fact lower risk. So this is an example where regulation is a little bit upside down. I think that's the first hurdle. The second hurdle is, I think all of us would have a huge ambition, right? And it's not about optimizing in the margin, but really changing things at scale. And so, of course, there you want to go as fast and as big as possible, and you want the whole world to know about your solution. And that requires some patience and a lot of grit and going through the grind and setting up your company and scaling it. But regulation is definitely one of the top of mind challenges for us.
And, you know, from your perspective, do you see any light at the end of the tunnel on this one? Could you get a couple of entrepreneurs and innovators to say, actually, let's do a stress test of regulatory burdens and say, we can actually still protect the consumer up to this level, and the rest of it you could take as rest. But as long as we make sure we do no harm, our regulatory toolkit should be different. And because government's not going to do it because of the politics and the leadership around it and the electoral cycle. But you need someone to think differently about creating a different regulatory toolkit that could actually move forward, no?
Yeah, it would be few thoughts. I think in general, regulatory burdens are increasing rather than decreasing. And a lot of fintechs, but also incumbents, are complaining that most of the work and the resources that they do revolve around KYC rather than actually operating the same business. And for young businesses, that is something that can really kill you, right? So I think it would be good for the European, community of legislators at large to be thinking about what is a pragmatic way forward, where you take, risks that are acceptable, right? So where consumer protection is high, but you also have a range of flexibility to operate. In general, though, I mean, regulators are run by smart people who are willing to have a conversation. So, I'm also happy to see that regulators are open to have a discussion, but maybe this is something where fintechs also more collectively could, speak and have a dialogue with regulators on what is needed to enable companies here to move a little bit faster and not get sunk down in the weeds of regulation before they even got started.
No, but regulations often, it's a hammer and on a nail, because it's trying to deal with every scenario possible often, and sometimes you just turn the tables on it, don't you? And I think that's why I think it would be great if some of you were to come together and actually share how you would redefine the regulatory toolbox for innovators and entrepreneurs in this space. But there's a thought. Thank you for that. I'm going to move to Franz. Franz, similarly, what are the challenges that you have faced or are facing in developing your solution? We all know America's made this historic announcement of investment on climate action. So you've got, if you like, the political mood and the political context right, but what are the challenges you see that you face in developing your solution?
Certainly. Well, I think Jackie highlighted a key one. Innovating in fintech does require compliance or non-compliance at your own risk. And oftentimes, as we've seen, particularly with crypto, that has resulted in a catastrophic outcomes for certain investors and for businesses. And so we take great care to comply judiciously with all of the regulations, and that comes at a cost as well, because it's time consuming, and yet I think it's essential to have fair rules of the road. Now, when we're thinking about expansion, and we've been urged greatly to come into the European market. In fact, the Dutch, we were part of the ABN AMRO and Techstars Future of Finance program, and so there's a lot of interest in the Netherlands. We just signed an MOU with a Dutch asset manager as well. And those regulations are different than the ones in Germany or in Italy, or India or China for that matter. And so as a US entity, we are fully compliant in the US, but it becomes cost prohibitive at times to be able to expand due to those regulations and the lack of harmony. So that's one sort of policy recommendation or idea that we could take up, particularly in the context of this new regulatory framework coming along around crowd investing across the EU. Could it be harmonized with the US requirements? That's an idea. From a challenge standpoint as well, though, I think in the attention economy of today, where we are all drawn to memes of dogs and Dark Brandon or whatever else, it's very difficult to earn the eyeballs that it takes to scale a fintech, particularly one that is consumer facing and allows retail investors to come in. It's not a matter of whether they want to act on climate change, because we know that they do. And we know that if they're made aware of this, we're going to have a high probability of converting investors. But getting in front of them and simply getting their attention and sharing the opportunity to invest as little as $100 into climate projects is a hurdle as well.
Thank you. You know, it doesn't make you wonder that you have Amazon and other multinational companies that, you know, whether it's to do with ease or not, but having the capacity to be global and overcome these challenges. It's not just about scale and volume, potentially, but I wonder how you persuade some of the larger companies to create space for people like you to kind of be on the wings or the back of their development so that you are able to then scale your proposition. But that requires a different imagination from some of these leaders, I imagine, that to make it happen. But there's a thought that, you know, wouldn't it be interesting if you did get some of these international multinationals that operate with ease across different economies? Okay, the product might be different, but there's some learning and sharing there. If they're committed to climate action and they know that this could be the driver of solutions, it would be great if they could make space for people like yourselves in the marketplace by using their infrastructure. But you perhaps think about that more. You're 5 months old, and so therefore you tell us about the challenges that you've encountered in getting to your place. What do you perceive as being the future ones for you?
Yeah, I'm 5 months old live, but we are working on that for now 2 years, and so long because of regulation, of course. Same point that Jacqueline and Franz, of course. I think regulation, of course, is very important for the consumer, and as a customer also of other banks, I'm very happy that they are regulated and they are fully compliant. But now, as an entrepreneur in FinTech, I understand the burden. And you know, when you are an old bank, also managing millions and having the budget, this is not an issue for a young player like me. I started when I was 25 years old, so it's very hard to be taken seriously by all the actors, especially, of course, regulation. And this has been a long path to overcome it, but here we are. The other steps are still very, very, very hard to achieve, because you know, for having the license, banking license of credits, so like the highest one, to create money, to do credits, this is something, especially in France, that is very, very difficult to have. So for instance, Revolut found it in the eastern of Europe. We will try to have it, of course, in France, but it is going to be quite a challenge. And more like an anecdote, for instance, in France, and this is special to France, I cannot say I'm a neobank, neither that I'm a bank or anything. This I'm not allowed because of the banking lobby, I guess. So, and this is kind of hard for me. I'm in the communication and marketing side to say what I am without being able to say what I am. This is a very big challenge, because if you say I'm a prestataire de paiement, prépayé or something like that, it's like a lot of words, and French is already a language of a lot of words. So that's very hard. And France wants to be like the champion of green finance and stuff like that, but does not allow us to have the vocabulary to become a champion. Whereas in Germany, you can be a bank, whereas you're not a bank. In UK, you can say you're a bank, whereas you're not really a bank. So yeah, we have quite a strange challenge like that, but we manage and we will do it.
Indeed. You know, one of the things I'm struck by from all of your contributions is you've picked on regulation as the biggest challenge. And so you must have such resolve and sense of purpose that you believe that people would adapt and adopt behaviors to access your service, access what you're doing. Because if I think about it as an individual, one of my biggest concerns is, will my idea fly? But did you go through that moment of insecurity, say, I'm creating this portal, I'm creating this, I can't call it a bank, or, you know, carbon equity, and will people come? Was it almost like a foregone conclusion for you that, you know, this would work? Was that the thing that you need for entrepreneurs to have this kind of, you know, passion and belief in the idea? Jacqueline?
Yeah.
Oh, no, more, carry on, please.
No. I think you need that passion in finance industry. You have to be very passionate about your project, because this is very, very long to develop. But I think, as Jacqueline and Franz, we are here because of a biggest goal, than just I don't know, being in finance or making money or anything. We are here because we are very, very stressed about climate change. I mean, I don't know about you, Jacqueline and friends, but obviously I am. I picked the banking sector not because I was a banker before. I mean, I never did finance before. I was just intern before. Just because banking industry has the biggest power to shape the world, and so to be able to stop change of climate change. So yes, you need to be very passionate to overcome all those challenges, and our mission at Gringot really bear us through that point.
Yeah.
Great. Go on,
One
Jackie.
thing to add perhaps is that green finance or climate investing increasingly are a no-brainer, because if you look at, investing is all about investing in growth industries, right? If you purely think from a financial point of view, you want to be investing in a growth industry. In the next 10, 20, 30 years, we're going to have one of the biggest waves of innovation the world has ever known, because we're going to have to transition and rebuild our fossil fuel economy in a low carbon way. And so that's going to imply innovation across every single thing that we do, from the way that we eat to the way that we travel, to the way that we build or produce things, right? And so there's a ginormous innovation opportunity. So even if you don't care about climate or impact or green, it still makes so much sense to be investing in, in climate investing, in climate change, to get a green bank account, to be investing in ESG stocks, so you'll have exposure to the winners of the future and you divest from the losers of the future, which are fossil fuel intensive companies. So, this is the way forward. So, whether I'm going to build a unicorn company, I don't know. Maybe it's not that important, but whether I know that I'm working on a theme that I deeply care about, and that is a massive growth industry, and we'll take it from there. There will be many challenges on the way, but that's the exciting part.
No, it's good. It's good to hear. It's good for people to listen and watch, hear you, because having that sense of purpose, but also responding by an activism and a disruption in your own way to the biggest crisis the world has ever experienced. And this year alone, just waiting for the reports from the IPCC and others saying it's too late because the temperatures and the sheer havoc that's been created from Pakistan to the United States, Africa and Europe is phenomenal. And so it's compelling, but I suppose the question will be, will the political leaders listen and read the narrative before them, rather than focus on business as usual? And I think, Jacqueline, you're right. There's something about making sure that how do you create a business case or a compelling situation where this becomes normative, that actually, even if you don't care, it's normative to bank with green stuff and climate action. So there's a challenge in this. Franz, over to you very briefly, because I'm running out of time.
Yeah, I mean, no doubt we're in a code red for humanity on the climate crisis. And, in perhaps poor taste, citing a famous quote of, when there's blood in the streets, buy property, there is a great market signal that comes from countries of the world uniting around a shared framework in the Paris Agreement and charting a path toward a well below 2 degree and 1.5 degree future. And those that move quickly and innovate to fill that space and provide those technology innovations and make those investments will be the leaders of the future. You look at the 20 largest market cap companies 20 years ago, and then the 20 largest market cap companies today, and they're completely different. None of them have been there. So who will be the 20 largest companies in 20 years? I cannot nearly guarantee you that they will all have something to do with climate or have been early movers on climate innovation. And so investing in those companies and those opportunities now behooves all of us for numerous and varied reasons. But it's the challenge of our lifetimes as well. We truly don't have another option other than to spend the next 30 years solving this challenge. And regardless of what we do in the intervening periods of time, there's enough warming baked into the atmosphere that these problems will get worse before they get better. But if we do everything we can and we prove ourselves to be up to the task of our generation and deliver those solutions, then we, by the time we're in our twilight years, we will know if we've been successful at tackling this challenge. So it takes all of us, whole of society mobilization. And we're each playing a part to try to make that go faster and scale the solutions faster than the pace of the problem.
No, indeed. And I suppose one of the concerns I have is that the clock is ticking faster. And, my sense, my intuition is that, we don't have time to take the usual approach to R&D. We don't have time to take the usual approach to scale from a good idea to, something that can really work on a industrial level. And I just wondering, what are the lessons from COVID that, the world is brought into lockdown, a vaccine is produced at the fastest rate we've ever known in history. Hospitals are built within weeks. It feels like we almost need to think about climate action and the crisis of climate on the equivalent par to COVID. And how do we get that kind of reaction to scale our imaginations and our political leadership in that way? So I want to turn to the question and conclude with this. It's about the role of government. At the end of the day, as with COVID, we know it was taxpayers' money, or your money, our money, that actually buoyed up society. It made societies be sustained, whether that's for the private sector, hospitals, schools, etc., and so forth. And, we've seen a lot of mealy-mouthed commentary. Whenever we've had this incredible, let's say, circus that comes together on the Paris Agreement, and, you have COP26, COP27, 28, everyone gets together. And there's always a sense of like, hey, this time we're going to do it. And then suddenly there's deflation. And I think that, I suppose from what I want to ask all of you is, what do you want from government? What would you like government to do? Because as a think tank, one of the biggest issues we're going to be focusing on in the next year we launch this year is the notion of a renewed social contract. And to rethink the roles and responsibilities of state, public, private, civil society, and the risk we manage between us collectively, and who actually pays for that, and what the roles are from a more than profit, a more than market, and more than kind of size of government role, but actually thinking about how do we come together differently and better and rethink and get rid of these shibboleths and receive wisdom about how economies and governments run, and move to a new model. So that's what we are focused on. So I want to hear from all the three of you as entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs. What would you like? What would you like from government? Jacqueline.
I think the first thing that I would like at an individual level is courage. I think it's really time, system change does not happen by itself. System changes because somebody stands up and makes a change, right? And so I think, if I could ask for something, is that people, themselves ask themselves, what is the very best thing I can do? And I think in politics, and in governments, we're often too short-sighted because short-term interests get in the way. What will my voters think? And so we operate in really short cycles. And what we need is long-term thinking, and we need personal courage to sacrifice whatever your voter support or short-term interests for long-term critical action, and to be more selfless in doing so. So that's
they listen to this. Because what you're describing is what we all want. And some of the politicians I've spoken to over many, many years will say that's what they went in with. And suddenly they go through the washing machine of spinning and doctoring and party whipping. And suddenly they become the dark side of them. And suddenly that passion is gone. But let's hope we can change a bit of that politics in this brave new world. Franz, over to you. What do you want? You've been in administration. What would you like from government?
I think transparency and setting the rules of the road really is the key. And at a granular level, I think that means because the private sector is going to behave in whatever way is most advantageous to those individual businesses. And that's their fiduciary duty in the Milton Friedman School of Economics. The government needs to be the Keynesian version of leveling the playing field and making it possible for everyone to participate, protecting those that are most vulnerable against the ravages of the free market economy. So being proactive around regulation and enforcement where it does have clear rules of the road, and then being proactive about being transparent in the rule-making process for those areas where we're still defining those rules and ensuring that they work for all parties is incumbent on any policymaker.
Great, thank you. Last but not least, Maud.
Yeah, so of course, courage, transparency, and also we need them to be bold. We need all our president, prime minister, chancellor to understand that we are at a crossroad of our history. Whether they want it or not, they are here at a moment that is like the most important moment of our species, like of the entire humankind. And we will be here, human people will be here like in 100 years, 200 years, maybe we will be much more less, but there will still be people. And those leaders have to understand that the history will judge harshly people that will not take responsibility of their position and of the challenge that were in front of them. But every crisis is also an opportunity, to shine, to whatever your motivation. Is it to save the humankind? Is it to be the most famous person in 200 years, 1,000 years? I don't care. I just want them to act, to understand that the 2 years, 5 years ahead challenge are like very small compared to what we are going to have to be in front of for my generation, for your generation, for our children. I guess everybody, they all have children, I don't care what are their motivations. I just want them to act and to understand that history is going to watch them and also judge them. So they need to do something.
Absolutely, and they need to care. But let's take France as an example. The shocking swing to the right and the far right, that's contouring the reaction to politics and politicians. We've seen what's happening in Italy and elsewhere. Mm-hmm. So there's something about we need to find ways and pathways to work with communities who, I suppose, shift their hopes and fears to the right because they feel the mainstream is not actually delivering for them. And on this agenda, whatever your politics, it shouldn't affect your commitment to climate action. But unfortunately, what our kind of far right or extremism does is think about the here and now. It's not a forward-looking agenda. It's about, today and tomorrow. And I think one of the challenges for us in climate action will be to persuade and bring together those who feel that actually today is what I want to protect, not my future.
Yeah, but already today, in France, we have a huge fire, we have a huge flood, we have a huge problem in energy provision. We have the rise in the price for all the food. We have many things, and the people who are right now voting for far right are the ones who are going to be the most exposed to climate change. So this is also for them.
Indeed, absolutely, I agree. But it's how politics will narrate that, unfortunately. And as you know, particularly in your back garden, Ms. Plain hasn't been, shy in talking about where those problems come from. However, let's go back onto the positive about that opportunity that you, as an ecology, as a community, present to Europe and the world. And we're really pleased that you are here with us. Thank you all very much. This concludes our series. As I said, this is our third and final installment on the Transatlantic Dialogue on climate action. I hope that we can have many more. But, I've said this at each one of these, those who've been following this series, is that I think there's a power and magic of bringing all of you together in one space. And I think if we were to do that, as one famous very famous sociologist said that, you know, a small community of people coming together with a shared mind can actually change the world. And we've seen that in history. And she was right in saying what she said. And clearly, if we bring some of you together in the same space, given what you do and what you articulate, because in each of these installments, one of the things that's been really at the heart of this is values. All of you, whether it's on mobility or whether it's about nudging behavior and what we've heard today, you're interested in democratizing processes, you want to be inclusive, and you want to spread access in a way that's inherently about equality and social justice, whilst tackling the world's biggest threat as we face it. So thank you all very much. And, you know, we look forward to working with all of you. And hopefully this dream I have of, or we have, of pulling all of you together in one room may actually happen at some stage. And those of you who are listening out there, get in touch. But I want to thank all the three of you for being inspiring, motivating, and actually showing that in the context of such negativity, you've stood up and shown that you can actually achieve change and be positive about it and have impact. So we wish you well, good luck to all of you, and to our listeners and viewers, I hope you found this thought-provoking, stimulating, and, you know, informative. And you can see what can happen when you actually innovate or enterprise on some of these matters and some of these topics. And you can learn from some of the contributors that we have, but also connect with them. We can always put you in touch with each other to make sure we do that thing that we do rarely, which is to share knowledge and learning and make connections across the pond. So we look forward to doing that with all of you. Thank you all. See you again. For those of our listeners and viewers who go log in to our next event, I recommend that you go back to our website to see what's on offer. This is the opening of our autumn season with this particular event. We have so many lined up for the remainder. So go to our website for our next installment and our next event on the 12th of September. Thank you all very much. Take care, look after yourselves, and mind your distance. Thank you very much.